All right. Can you guys hear me all right? Good. Yeah, all right. So we're on the middle of page 64. It says we did exactly the same thing with our lives. Talking about the paragraph above, how they're comparing it to a business that takes inventory and gets rid of the things that are no longer useful. And we apply that to our life. So we took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, I'll circle that word self manifested in various ways, it shows itself in various ways, is what had defeated us. I'll circle the word us. We considered its common manifestations. Now, the common manifestations that we will look at when we look at your four step is our resentments, is a manifestation of self, is our fears, also another manifestation of self, and also our conduct or sexual conduct in relationships, which is another manifestation of self. Why'd I ask you to circle self and us? Because they're two different things. Self is that minion, that talker that's in your head, that narrative, that story that's in your head. Uh, and the us is our true, authentic self. And we're going to be looking at the difference between it because when we write inventory, we're looking at who we are not. And we're going to get rid of that person or that talker, and our true authentic self will come out to play because it's defeating us. I've been defeated for quite a long time and been a victim of my thinking, crooked thinking. I'm just going to quote Hank Parker's here, crooked, deranged man, right? Yeah. What was his middle name again? Hank Parker's Throckmorton, right? Was it something that I forgot? That's what we're going to be looking at when we look at our inventory. And over to you, Paige.
Pew pew. I was busy trying to get a flyer and look up Hank Parker's middle name. Um, Hanky, as I don't call him that. He would hate me. Anywho, yes, what we're trying to do is exactly what Terry was talking about. We're trying to clear away the stuff inside of us that is not us. The stuff inside of us that is blocking us off from God. And as Terry said, there are going to be three sections to our four-step inventory. And here's why that's important. I've been doing this a while and I've been working with people a while. And I can't tell you how often I will explain and re-explain and emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as I'm quoting from Bill, that we got three sections. And I can't tell you how often somebody will come to me and be like, I've done my fourth step, and they've only done resentments. And I've got to be the big jerk that tells them that they're only a third of the way through. So I just want to emphasize those three sections. Now, as we get into it, one of the things that I think is kind of helpful is to explain how do we get started? How do we prepare ourselves? How do we set ourselves up for success? Well, the first thing that I'm going to need is a notebook. And this notebook it's about A4 size, and that's a good size in terms of page size. Not page size, page size. We're not body shaming me over here. Gosh, you can tell I'm overtired because it's real weird out to start. But I'll let you know how I format the page. 80 pages probably isn't enough. And so I want to get a notebook and then I also want to get a pen. Now, this suggestion is not anywhere in the book, but it is a suggestion that comes from somebody who has their own hoodie that says inventory behooves me. So you can take it with a grain of salt. But here's what I would recommend. Get a pen that you like writing with. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can get it at the dollar store, but get a pen that's easy for you to write with. Don't get one where you're gonna like scribble it on envelopes just to get it moving. You know what I mean? If inventory already feels like a chore when we're not doing it. Get one that writes the way we like it. Don't have to spend a lot of money on it. Also, if you work at an office, I'm just going to throw it out there. Do not steal your step four stationery. Just going to throw that out there. For those who are employed in the office, don't do that. Just go out. You can buy it, dollar store. Or I think in the UK it's called Poundland, which is wild. It's wild you guys call it that. No judgment. All right, so I got my notebook. I got a pen. Before I get into that inventory, what I want to do is yeah. The more you stay sober, the more you write inventory, the more you will become a stationary nerd. You know, I show up here. I think I'm like a cool, toughy person. I'm doing drugs behind a dumpster, and now I'm like, ooh, would you look at the glide on that Sharpie S gel, or ooh, let me have a look at that Bic Gelosity. Things change. Things change. We grow. So we got our notebook, we got our pen. The first thing that we're going to do before we ever do any writing on our inventory that I think can be so helpful is to start with a prayer. Start with a prayer. And it can be any prayer that you want. We already did the third step prayer. If you wrote your own third step prayer, you could use those ones. I like to say something a little like, God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, I invite you into this process. I pray that you would guide me and direct me. Help me to see the truth about who I am. Help me to see the things inside of me that are blocking me from you. I ask that you help me to be fearless and thorough, that you would guide my heart, guide my mind, and guide my pen. Thank you, God. Hi, hi. Amen. Something like that. You can say any words you want. Then what we're going to do is we're going to write on our inventory. Now, I like to format my inventory in this way. I'll have three columns, and what I'll do is I'll draw a line about halfway across the page. It can be a little above halfway. We want a lot of space for this bad boy, this fourth column. I don't need a lot of space for columns 1, 2, 3. So I do one line halfway across the page or a little above that, and two lines vertically going up that split the page into four columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I flip the page and I draw a line about halfway down, halfway across, and two lines up. And I flip the page, line, line, line. And I do that on like 50 or 100 pages to set myself up for success. The lines are already drawn. I'm ready to go. And here's why this is helpful. Because I've had some people that are like, can I just like draw it once and then photocopy it a bunch? Here's my experience. There is spiritual value in drawing the lines. It might not feel like it, but I really believe that there is. Because almost everyone who comes to their first ever fourth step, but almost everyone who comes to inventory, we typically do so with fear, with trepidation. That idea that I'm scared of this process. And often with that feeling of overwhelm. I'm overwhelmed. I'm feeling like it's just too much. I don't know how to get started. And it's a simple, easy place to start and build momentum, drawing the lines. Now, here's the thing. We're all scared of doing the 4. Why? Because we're afraid of 5. But none of us have been afraid of doing lines before. Yeah, that's how we got here. It's an all-inclusive study. So and just like before, can't do too many lines. So I'm going to draw lines on all of these pieces of paper. And how I like to format it, which, by the way, if it's different than how you were taught, or it's different than how Terry talks about it, that is okay. That's okay. There are clear-cut, precise directions. And as we'll see in the third column, there's some wiggle room. There's some places where there's room for space and interpretation and different. And if you lay out your page format differently, are you going to get loaded? No, no, it's fine. This is just the way that I do it, and I found it to be the most effective, gives me a lot of room to run. And so what we're going to do is we draw those lines, and then when we get into our resentments, when we get into doing that work, we're going to do one column at a time. But when we've done our writing for the day, one of the things that can be really helpful is to end with a prayer. And you can use any prayer that you want. You can say it however you'd like, but something to the effect of God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. I asked that I would leave my thoughts and feelings and emotions with you and with this book. And I pray that I would go out from here to be a part of your world. So that's just some pre-step 4 suggestions. And what I do when I work with my sponsees, I don't give them the directions and send them off. What I do is I sit with them because then it gets done. That's typically what I do. So I really handhold the process. So, all right, let's get into it. So it says resentment is the number one offender. So we're getting into the first direction or the first part of our inventory, which is the resentments inventory. And when it says resentment is the number one offender, man, this is telling us we've got to be free of resentment. It's the number one thing that is blocking me from this power, that is keeping me wrapped in the bondage of self. And let's talk about the word resentment. It's etymological. Nope, I said it wrong every single time. The etymology of the word resentment, I was not going to be able to land that plane. My brain wants to keep trying, but for the sake of everyone, I will let that go. But the etymology of the word resentment is French. And what it means is refeel. So when we look at a resentment, what we're looking at is a refeeling of a negative emotion. And so that's what we're talking about. It goes on to say it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. So, this one thing, resentment, these refeelings of negative emotions, are more detrimental to us than anything else. From resentment, stems all forms of spiritual disease. So that's not to say all forms of spiritual sickness come from resentment, but every form of spiritual sickness can come from a resentment, which I don't know if he's being pretty clear. Do we think resentments are maybe not a good thing? I'm getting maybe some mixed messages. No, he's hammering it home. This is bad. This is bad. It is something I got to be free of, which is rude. Because I don't know about y'all, I can get a lot done on a good resentment. Oh, I could nurse that grudge. Actually, anyone ever rage clean the house? Not you, spiritual giants. You go to inventory right away. But I have rage cleaned, and with my lack of dopamine, that's probably the only way it gets done. Is if I'm doing a rage clean. But it says, from it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Now, this is important. This is describing our illness. When it talks about being mentally ill, we can make a note that what we're specifically referencing is the obsession of the mind, the thought that I have when I am sober that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink or first drug or first compulsive behavior, whatever brings you to this study. That is what it means to be mentally ill. And when it says being physically ill, what we are singularly speaking about is the allergy of the body. So once I take that drink, once I take that drug, once I engage in that compulsive behavior, that thing inside of me that sets off and tells me I need more. And that is how we diagnose the illness of alcoholism or the illness of addiction or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study, but as it is laid out in this book. So it says we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Now that's spiritual malady. That is that restless, irritable discontent. On page 52, it describes the bedevilments, a feeling of loneliness, can't make a living, a feeling of uselessness, a prey to misery and depression, that anxiety, that feeling of uselessness. That's spiritual malady, that feeling of being spiritually sick. And what's important about that is that addicts, alcoholics, compulsive gamblers, overeaters, sex, love, codependence, whatever brings you here today, we are not the only human beings that have a spiritual malady, that experience the spiritual sickness. If you don't believe me, go to your HOA or PTA meeting. You will find them, you will find some spiritually sick people that don't medicate with drugs or alcohol. But that is what we treat within the 12 steps. That is what we're treating. And that is what is fueling the obsession of the mind. It is fueling me to take that first drink or take that first drug or act out in that compulsive action. And that's spiritual malady, what I have come to find it to be for me. And I will always emphasize, if you disagree with me, what I will say is that you're right. You're right. And if that's the case, you're right. I'm wrong, you're right. But what I've come to find out is the spiritual malady is a conscious sense of separateness from God, I am consciously living with a sense of separateness, a conscious sense that I'm disconnected from this power, which is God. So, so how do I treat that? And I treat that by clearing away the stuff inside of me that is blocking me away from this power. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what we're here to do today. So, uh, this is the order. This is important. It says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So when the spiritual malady has been overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. That is the order. What we do is we treat the spiritual malady. That's what we treat first. Often I come to the rooms and I want to sort out my finances, or I want to sort out my health, or I want to sort out my living situation. But this is the order. This is the order. I treat this. And when the spiritual malady is overcome, when that is treated with the spiritual awakening, and that is our solution, what happens is that the obsession of the mind leaves. And when that leaves, I don't have the desire to take that first drink or take that first drug. And as a result, I don't. And if I don't set off the allergy. That's important. We treat the spiritual first. So in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So annoyingly, this is a pen to paper exercise. Again, unless you have some disability that makes it very difficult for you to, write pen to paper, I would encourage pen to paper. I used to be a tutor, and that should scare most of you. But there is something that happens in our brain, like it makes a connection, the hand to brain connection, writing it out. So in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper, pen to paper. Lame. What is this? And some of you are like, but they didn't have computers in the 1930s. They had typewriters. They had typewriters, and much of the book was dictated, and Ruth Hawk's typing away. Bill's talking it out. She's on a typewriter, so they did have typewriters. So it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And that is full stop. So that's what I want to do. I want to do one column at a time. And so how I set up my piece of paper is like this. And this is going to be column 1. And what I do is I put down the people, the institutions, or the principles with whom I'm angry. And unfortunately, this is what it always looks like. Mom, flip the page. Dad, flip the page. The ex, flip the page. The other ex. And then it gets a little bit more variable, but that's typically how that starts. And I'll share the screen how I like to set it up. Just that might be helpful as well. Boom, boom. And so what we're looking at is column 1. And column 1 is just going to be a single name. Flip the page. A single, we go names, and then institutions. And names are usually easy. They're the people we know. Mom, dad, the ex, our boss, our coworkers, the people at the HOA or the PTA, those spiritually sick jerks, the people in the rooms, our sponsors, friends, whoever comes to mind. And you can look up a step 4 resentment prompt sheet to prompt some people that you might have a resentment towards. You can also go on your social media and you'll find them. Go on your friends list, you'll find people. So those are people, and you don't have to do it in order. You don't have to do it in chronological order. It doesn't matter if you start with an institution. Institutions are places like AA, CA, a rehab, a company, a Visa, MasterCard, Poundland, Dollar Store. Those are institutions. Principles can be things like God. If I have a God resentment, this is where I put it down. If I've got religious trauma, I can put down a religion. Principles can also be things like old guiding sayings, like children should be seen and not heard. And Terry, we're always here for Phoenix. Woo! Children should be seen and not heard. Or let me think of another one. Only good girls do this. Or it could be things like having to write inventory, having to make amends. having to sponsor others, having to be honest, having to be open, having to be willing. If your coffee shop always gets your order wrong, that's we can put that down. So it is name, flip the page, name, flip the page, name, flip the page. And here's the thing, I don't want to self edit. What we did was we spoke about how resentments are more destructive than anything else, how from them all forms of spiritual disease can originate. From resentments, they block us off from the power that we need more than anything else. So if a name comes to mind, do not self edit. Write it down. Don't debate, don't argue, don't like, oh, it was years ago. No, I already did it. Doesn't matter if we did it on previous inventory. Does not matter. Write it down. The only harm that comes from putting pen to paper on inventory is I waste maybe 10 minutes of my life. That's the only possible downside that could happen from writing it down. But what's the upside? The upside is I get experience. I get more experience with myself. I get more experience with this process that I get to help others. And I get free of whatever that thing is inside of me that's at least blocking me a little bit. You know, again, resentment is a feeling of a negative emotion. Doesn't matter whether it happened 2 minutes ago or 20 years ago. I want to get free of it. So if it's on my mind, it's on my heart. And if I've asked God to guide me, I put it down. And so for me, I always want to do one column at a time because it breaks it down, because it's efficient, because it's effective, and sometimes it can be helpful in taking a lot of the emotionality out of it. And I can get drowning in that emotionality. So it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we're angry. That is column one. You can write that down. Then it says we asked ourselves why we were angry. And this is column two. And when people are like, oh, I don't like inventory, I'm like, why? Column two is great. You got to be petty. You got to use bad words. This is where we get to use language that should go in the sweater jar. But my biggest thing is use point form. I know that there are people that'll say no more than 17 words. I'm not as direct as that. But point form. Don't get into story. Why am I resentful at mom? Didn't pick me up from soccer. Wasn't the mom I wanted her to be. Wouldn't let me date the guy that was 20 years older than me and had a motorcycle and tattoos. Oh, mom, like that sort of thing. Point form. Point form. And I want to then go. So I get all of column one done. I go back and I get all of column two. Why am I angry? And so that's how I like to set up the page. So it goes on to say, so we asked ourselves why we're angry. Now, this is where most people get their third column from. I get my third column from a bit of a different place, the top of 65. But if you get it from the bottom of 64, top of 65, don't worry, it's fine. So it says, in most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt and threatened. So we were sore. We were burnt up. All right, over to you, Terry. Pew pew.
Yeah, thanks, Paige. Yeah. I think what popped out in my mind, a few things about this paragraph is resentment takes us out, especially for people in early recovery. If you have a little bit more than early recovery, then this book was written when someone had the most time had 4 years. Talk to some people with some time, and most of them will say complacency is probably right up there with being a top offender, top five. You know, there's more offenders, but we're looking at the number one, especially for someone who's brand new. And I mean, I was someone who's plagued with waves of self-pity and resentment in the first year and a half until I finally understood that resentment is a bugaboo for me. It's a bear trap. It's like messing with a poisonous snake, like I don't want to mess with snakes anymore, especially poisonous ones. And that's how I view resentment. And it says it destroys. Resentment destroys. It doesn't say alcohol destroys more alcohol. It just says resentment destroys more alcoholics. And you talked about it. There is three aspects to this. Is that not only we've been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. So there's a third component to it. And I think I talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago, where you get people that talk about this is a twofold or threefold illness. And I was one of the people that were part of the three, and I couldn't stand when people said two, and I would argue with them and I judge them. And let me say that both are right and both are wrong. Both are right. It says it right there in the book. There's three components. When you look at the twofold people, they say that spirit can never get sick. God doesn't get sick. I look at more of as the spiritual separation from God. Both are right, but both are wrong because we're both judging each other. And have you ever judged someone else because they said twofold, or they said the word recovering, or they said don't drink, go to meetings? And all of a sudden, if I'm hearing that, I'm deaf ears in an AA meeting and I'm not being useful. And I'm going to a meeting and I'm pissed off. And if you listen to that story long enough, what will happen is that you'll believe it and you'll walk around with a belief system thinking that you're right all the time. And you'll have a column two part, which is the cause. Why am I angry? I look at column two and I just a general way is that's my judgments of other people. That's how I'm judging you. And I get a kick out of people who start talking about column two and they go into story time. And I'm like, well, I'm really thanks for sharing your mind with me. It's sometimes I know that I'm not talking to the true authentic self. I'm talking to the disease of alcoholism, when I'm sitting down with a new guy. So I'm a big fan of that prayer too. Any type of prayer before writing is clutch. I used to recommend read pages 60 to 62 or 63 before you start writing. I also recommend the prayer saying, "Hey God, show me who is blocking me off from you, in your institution or a principal or a person. Show me who's in the way of you and blocking me off from the sunlight." And then why am I saying a prayer? Because a prayer is positional. It gets me back to right here, right now. And for us, the main problem of any alcoholic or addict centers in his mind rather than his body. It doesn't give our mind any wiggle room when we use a prayer before we start to write. Does that make sense? So I love that. Um, Now I'm looking at column three, and I think, Tage and I talked about this, and I I, I don't want to go too into depth into extended third column, uh, based on the fact it is complicated unless you actually write it out. Tage, I also do that as well. I don't just give someone instructions and set them on their way. I actually do it with them. And I recommend that you do that with them as well, because this process is not easy. Bill does not do a good job of putting this stuff in bullet points. You know, he writes something on page 65. There are actually three different resentments for Mr. Brown, but he doesn't put them in bullet points. I don't like that. Sometimes we need a good tour guide to go through it. So if you are sponsoring others, I recommend that you take some time to go over them, especially the first few resentments, so they get a hang of what's going on. Because this can be confusing and our mind could take us out of it. So, um, I guess in terms of looking at the third column and looking at self-esteem, that's how I view myself. In my pocketbook, if anything appears at my money or my time. Personal relationships is usually this how other people in the same sex feel about me. Sexual relationships is the opposite sex. What's the other one? Pride is another one as well, which means no one should or others shouldn't. I'll give you guys an example of this. This is from my personal experience. Ambition is what I want when I want it, or I want. And security is what I think I need in order to be okay. So I'll give you guys an example. My boss is too bossy, right? And that's my column dude. He's too bossy, and how does that affect my self-esteem? Well, I am the boss. I use my column two for column three, right? And so I'm walking around with a belief system that I think I shouldn't be bossed around. And when someone does boss me, I'm hurt, threatened, and I'm interfered with. What about pride? No one should be bossy, right? So, or what about ambition? I want him not to be bossy. Or security. I need my boss not to be bossy in order to be okay or in order to live. Um, does it affect my sex relationships? No. If it doesn't affect it, don't put it. Now, this is more advanced stuff, and I don't really want to go more into it. If you are new here, I don't recommend that at all. Just keep it as simple as possible. Um, Someone who has a little bit of time and wants to start writing again, I don't even go into that specific area of I am or others shouldn't. I just say, hey, write why it affects your security in a few words or less. Why is that really important? Because when I get to the fifth step, I forget what I wrote. Oh, I forgot. Why did I write self-esteem? Well, you wrote a little description on why. So we look back at that. So I recommend that you do that. So I'll just keep going and then go over this. So our grudge list, we set opposite each name, our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relationships we've been interfered with? So we were usually as definite as this example. Now look at Mr. Brown, right? And he has three different resentments, right? His attention to my wife. That's one. Told my wife of my mistress. Damn, right, Mr. Brown, you're good. And then number three, resentment, or the cause is Brown may get any my job at the office. So if you have someone that you're angry at, you could put them in bullet points and have many resentments for just one. Right? Just keep it simple. I mean, I used to say on the third one, which is my employer, how many words is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 words or less. Just keep it simple to the point, and that's it, right? Or not, you'll start going into a story. Now, I do have experience with people who have written a lot of names in column one. Page, I agree with you. Go down one column at a time. If you start going across, you'll start getting angry and pissed off. But if you do have a lot of people, and those are all the people that God talked to you to write down on a piece of paper that these are the people that are blocking off from him. I had someone who had 500 resentments. Like, what's up with that? That's a lot, right? And what was I thinking? Damn, that's going to be a long ass fifth step. That was the first thing I thought of. But those are the things that came to his mind. Were they redundant? Are there a lot of repeats? Yes, they are. But he wrote them down. This is an exercise between you and God, period. And if you need a help from a tour guide, go ahead, right? Um, I don't know, Paige, if you want to talk more about them, that'd be great. I don't really want to get more into the third column or the stage characters, but there are many. You could write down your stage characters, the talkers that are in your head. Like these are people who I adopted as who I am based on situations in my life. Like I'm a father. So you have Terry the father, right? And I don't like to be bossed around, right? So the little talker that's in my head when my boss bosses me around says, don't let him do that. You're an adult, back off, right? Or I'm a son, I have a parent, I'm a son, right? Um, or Terry the career man. That's another one, you know. Or Terry, I my money, right? So anyone who messes with my money, I'm hurt, threatened, or interfered with. Anyone, not pay you back, yo, where's my money at? And that talker that's in your head, which is I am my money, is going to be talking to you and whispering to you. And they could be so loud that they'll you won't hear God. That's why it says that it shuts us off from the sunlight of the spirit in the next page. So these are all just different ways to identify the talkers that are in your head. So if you're anything like me, I take a shower in the morning and I got 15 people talking to me and I look around, it's just me. If I am not in fit spiritual condition, if I am feeling dis-ease and feeling sick, right? Um, there's a lot of talkers that are in my head. This exercise helps you to identify them and to see who is actually talking, and then you give it to God in six and seven. This is all just becoming aware. This process is just helping you. The self-examination that we're doing right now is to help you become self-aware because where they're going to crop up. And some people don't understand who is talking to them. They just think it's their own voice. Yet again, it's self and us are two different things. And if I listen to self long enough, I believe that's who I am, but that's who I'm not. And I'll take action on it and I'll go play God. And what happens when I play God? I step on your toes, I get hurt, and I think about getting drunk or high. Simple as that. I don't, yeah, Paige, I don't want to get too involved in it because it gets complicated. So I'll send it back over to you.
Pew pew. Yeah, no problem. No problem. And how I do my third column is I don't even ask that they ask why. But one of the things that I will like sort of where I get my third column from is the top of page 65 where it says on our grudge list. So, like Terry and I are saying, I already have the names. I already have why I have the jerks. I have why they're jerks and their stupid jerky behavior. And then I get into we set opposite. So that for me is the direction. Set opposite each name are injuries. And so for me, the third column where it comes from is right here. Hold on, I'm going to do the screen share. Whoop. Uh, hold on. No, I gotta. It's not up anymore. Uh, all right. So it comes from was it our self-esteem? And for me, I take that self-esteem as how do I feel about myself? Right? If it affects my self-esteem, for me, it's like, do I feel worse about myself? Do I feel less than? Do I feel not important? Now I got it. Now I got it. So if it's for me, how I do it is if it affects self-esteem, they just write self-esteem, or I just write self-esteem. Then it says, and I then do ambition, but ambition, which for me is that desire to go out and do things in the future. Like if I had a sponsor that was mean to me and didn't sit with me to write inventory or told me only 13 words or less, I could put my sponsor down and that would affect my ambition, my desire to go out and do things. Or the one I use, like if I had a teacher that was really mean to me, maybe that affected my desire to go out and learn. So that's the view I take with it. And then security, and I break down security into three types. My physical security. So what was I physically hurt? Was I physically threatened? Did it affect my physical being? Did it affect my emotional security? Was I emotionally hurt? Was I emotionally threatened? Did it affect my emotional well-being? If so, I write it down. Financial security. Did they take my money? Were they messing with my money? My money, or my job, or that did not pay me back, steal from me? If so, write it down. Personal relations for me, that's my relationships with you guys, like non-romantic, non-sexual relationships. So if it affected my relationships with other people, I just write that down. Sex relations. If it affected my relationships with people in a sexual or romantic way, I write it down. Now let's go back to that example of mom. She wouldn't let me date the older guy with tattoos and a motorcycle. Even though it's not a direct comparison, my resentment towards my mother would have affected my sex relations. That's a hypothetical. I didn't ever date anyone functional enough to have a motorcycle. You know, they had shopping carts. That's who I was dating. You know, so and what I'm trying to do, just as like Terry was talking about, is I'm trying to see the depth of the resentment. The more of these that are affected, the deeper the resentment. And the other way to say it, the deeper the resentment, the more areas of my life that are affected. And so you'll notice that mine are a little bit different than Terry's. A lot of people use pocketbook. I use financial security. And then in the example, as we're talking about Mr. Brown, it's like sex relations, self-esteem in brackets, fear. Sex relations, self-esteem in brackets, fear. Security, self-esteem in brackets, fear. It's like, wait, that's not at the bottom of 64. That's not at the top of 65. What's up with that? And so I think this is a beautiful example of in this book, we have clear cut, precise directions, and we are trying to extract those directions. There's some wiggle room. There's some wiggle room. You won't get drunk if you write pocketbook instead of financial security. You won't. It won't get you loaded. We're just trying to see what's blocking us. And there, as Terry was talking about the people in the meetings, the 90 meetings, 90 days, just don't drink. Those can be examples of principles. So if I'm a twofold versus threefold or threefold versus twofold, and I'm like, they're idiots. I call them one, twofold people, that's a principle. Call them one, threefold people, that's a principle. Just don't drink, go to meetings. Write that down. That's a principle. And I can look at those in my fourth step. And I can't tell you how cool it is. Man, I have learned so much about who I am and the things that are blocking me from God from my petty resentments. Oh, I have learned so much. Man, I did this meeting, and it was my home group for a number of years in this one fellowship, and there was a meeting in a different fellowship that happened on the same floor like 30 minutes later, and they would have to get chairs. And wouldn't they get those chairs so loudly and disrupt? I'm giving you a hint for the fourth column. My meeting, and I learned so much about like where I was playing God and where I was trying to control from that. I was working with a sponsee, and Tim Hortons for the Canadians. They would always get her coffee order wrong. And we did inventory on it. And it was a powerful spiritual experience from taking Tim Hortons through the columns. So, really, like if it's on your heart, it's on your mind, don't edit, write it down. Write it down. And also, as Terry and I are talking about, one column at a time and sitting with people, man, that gets it done very quickly. I do it because literally in an hour or two, we're done columns 1, 2, and 3. We're done. It does not take long. And sitting with them, the people that I work with helps to overcome that fear, overcome that perfectionism. I know you guys don't struggle with that. Me all over the place. And it's like, really, Paige, you? Yep. Struggle with that, like that overwhelm. I don't know how to get started. And we're right in the middle of it, and we don't have time to be afraid. And there was a cool thing I did at a meeting not long ago. I'll share it. There's a gentleman at this meeting. We get a lot of gentlemen from a local treatment center, and the treatment center makes them go through like a fourth step. And there was a gentleman who came up to me, and he's like, I have some questions about the fourth step. And he's like, I don't know if I have any resentments. And then I'm like, buddy, pass me the announcements book. And what we did was we wrote out in an hour his columns 1, his columns 2, and column 3. And just from that, in like an hour, it does not take long to do it. Even if you got a lot of names, it does. That's maybe 2 hours. It does not take long. And yeah, I hear the extended. That's more experiential. Now I'll read through Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, the employer, the wife. I can do that. But where I find that this really comes alive is when we get to the fourth column. See, when we get to the fourth column, yeah, you're in for it, Terry. I love to come back to this example and see what that fourth column would be for these people, and to have that experience. So resentful Mr. Brown, his attention to my wife, that affects sex relations, self-esteem, fear. And that's how we can read it across. But as Terry was saying, we write it down. Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, the employer, the wife. So told my wife of my mistress, that affects sex relations, self-esteem, in brackets, fear. Brown may get my job at the office. Security, self-esteem, in brackets, fear. Miss Jones, she's a nut. She snubbed me. I'm now getting into character. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gossip. Ugh, that Miss Jones. Personal relationship, self-esteem, in brackets, fear. Employer, unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire me for padding my expense account. Self-esteem, and that affects his self-esteem, in brackets, fear, security. My wife misunderstands and nags. Ugh, wives, am I right? Likes Brown, wants house put in her name. And that affects his pride, his personal relations, security, and fear. And so at this point, it's just about that person's a big, or that principal or that institution is a big smelly jerk. And this is how they were the big smelly jerk. And column 3 is how their big smelly jerk behavior affected me. It goes on to say nothing, or we went back through our lives. So not just our drinking career, not just The last 2 weeks, we went back through our lives. So whatever comes up in the in my life, in the experience of my existence, and even if it happened before I was born, write it down. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Because these three columns are going to be the springboard into a new way of life if I'm willing to dive into that fourth column. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. And if I look at the first three columns, yeah, would you look at all of these wrong people, principles, and institutions? They're wrong all over the place, and they got their wrongness all over me. Yuck. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. So that idea that I saw that you were wrong and that's where I stopped, that's as far as I tend to have ever gotten. But what was the result? It says the usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. You see, I think if I stay in that place of you hurt me and that anger or that victim, that can keep me safe, but it doesn't work. They continue to hurt me and I continue to stay hurt. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. And this is a tie back to the third step. When we're talking about the actor playing the director, I'm in the position of God, trying to fight, to rest, to wrestle satisfaction and happiness out of this world. I'm trying to get my way. My way, how I in Sandy Beach, he would talk about the way how to avoid never getting disappointed by not getting your way. It's not to have a way. Rude, rude. Sandy Beach calling me out. So it says, as in war, the victor only seemed to win. Seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. When you quote unquote won an argument, and then you still got those yucky anger feelings, and they don't got nowhere to go. And I'm right, but I'm not even right. It's like a war. You won the war, but at what cost? There's that devastation that happens. And it's just as true with resentments. Pew pew. Over to you, Terry.
Yeah, in war, both sides get hurt, right? Um, I mean, I'm looking at anger and I don't really see it as an emotion. I see it as a reaction. Um, when I'm reacting to life because of a set of old ideas or belief systems that I'm walking around with. So I'm thinking about an experience that I had where I made amends to this individual. And um, it was funny. I used to deliver pizzas and he got the good tip one time and I didn't. And I was really upset. Why? Because I thought I need money in order to be okay, or I needed in order to live. That's something that's just was part of my old personality. That was very difficult to get rid of because I could not self-will it out of me. I needed God's help with it. But I walked around with it. And whenever my money was messed with, I was hurt or I was threatened all the time just because of him. And I was constantly fighting with this individual. Yes, he got the good deliveries for me that day. And what did I do for the next 6 months? I didn't make his life a living hell just that night. Every single day, I took all the good deliveries from him. And one night, about 6 months later, he got a $50 tip and I didn't get it. And I was really angry because I was the one that didn't get it. And check this out. I remember I was walking outside so angry and so disturbed, like really upset, pissed off. Like I was about to go and I saw his car and I was like, you know what? This is a good time to go spit on this guy's car. This is when I had 4 or 5 years sobriety. You know, think about that. I had 4 or 5 years sobriety. Ain't a grand a win stop only, right? And that's the thing about resentments. When we look at it, it's just a trick to look at our selfishness and where we're playing God. And well, I had a belief system and I reacted on that all the time. And I was angry all the time because I was in fear all the time because I thought I was going to lose something that I should have or something that I did have. And I remember walking to that car, and I remember hearing a little voice, a little whisper deep down inside said, as in war, only the victor only seemed to win. That kept going on and on in my head. I was like, damn it, I'm brainwashed, Paige. I'm brainwashed now from AA. But that kept going on in my head. And I had a pause moment, and it said turn. And I was like, then I don't know if it really meant for me to physically turn or turn my thoughts so that I could help, but I actually didn't turn and I didn't spit on that guy's car. And 3 days later, I stayed in that resentment. I was still pissed off. I didn't make a decision based on based on self that put me in a position to be hurt, but I still made a mistake, right? I was about to do something that I would have probably regretted. And I made a decision that I was being dominated. And if you get someone who's armed with the facts and has a pretty good knowledge and working knowledge on how to decipher these pages and showing you where you're being dominated with your thinking, um, it makes so much more sense, and you become aware of it as you go on. And I became aware that I was being dominated by a belief system, and I didn't see it until I actually wrote something down. And I saw myself that I needed money in order to live, and it was killing me. So I made amends to him. He doesn't speak English, and I had some my boss had to interpret for me, Paige. And I said what I had to say, and I said, "How can I make this right?" And blah blah blah. And then he's explaining it. I'm like, hold on, that doesn't sound too good. This is what's going on in the back of my head. Like, he's got to say it this way, and all he hears is a little whisper say, "Shut up, Terry. Just shut up. You're no longer in war. You're no longer in battle with this guy. Just let it happen." So, and it did, and we actually became friends after that. Uh, he was helping me learn Spanish, and I was teaching him English. But the more I fight to have my way, things get worse. Uh, and that next paragraph is like the kill page. They kill us. I love this paragraph. I've had moments where this paragraph hits me in recovery, just like I talked about being brainwashed with the moments of, as in war, the victory when the season. This popped into my head whenever I get angry. And I don't know, I think are we past? I don't know if we have enough. This is a big paragraph.
It's up to you if
Uh,
you want to start on it or if you want to call it early. It's up to you.
let's get a show of hands. Who wants us to read it, or who wants us to do it next week? I got Tony, one hand. You gotta put your virtual hand so we can count. We got two, Lynn, Elaine, three, Trey, four, Rebecca, five.
Okay. And here's what we could always do is we can give it a go and we can start back at it at next week as well. We get as far as
That's
we get and we kick it off next week at It Is Plain. So we'll kick you take It Is Plain and we'll do It Is Plain next week as well. And so you
okay.
get what you get. And
I
then
like that.
somebody gets upset and needs to
All
write
right,
inventory. Sorry, over to you, Terry.
got it. So it is plain that a life which includes deep inside of you, rooted inside of you, resentment leads only to fertility. That means uselessness and unhappiness. To the precise extent that I permit these, that's telling me that I permit them, I allow them in my life. And do I squander the hours that might have been worthwhile in the beginning of recovery? I'd squander for weeks and months, pissed off. I allow these resentments. What I do with resentments is I nurture them, I grow them, I fan them, I water these resentments. I like to watch them grow up and become amazing trees. Like that's my thing. And I squander so much time listening to a story that's in my head, like watching ESPN and the replay, like da 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 da, and I'm playing it over and over and over, and I'm refilling it, reliving it the situation, and it changes. My mind will change the actual thing that writes down. The crazy thing when you actually write the inventory down. Most of my resentments, in my first time I wrote out the resentments, they were fancy. They were made up. I was like, that's BS. That doesn't make any sense. That didn't happen. But this is all up here. And because I'm listening to that, I have no connection with this that's inside of me, this God consciousness, this intuitive sense. I'm just listening to that for such a long time. And squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. I mean, I think about how much time I've spent not living in the moment, either living in the future or living in the past, being dominated, right? And it says, but with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance, maintenance just means to keep going and growth of a spiritual experience, a personality change. This business of regret, resentment is infinitely grave. That's talking about killing us. That's a kill. I'd put number one above that. That's the first death threat they give us. This is like the death threat. And then and I get angry, these words pop into my head or into my consciousness. It says, whenever I'm angry, I said, resentment is infinitely grave. Oh, okay. And then the next sentence says, we found that resentment is fatal. Oh, that's another death threat right there. That's killing us. And then when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from God, right? The sunlight of the spirit. The insanity, another threat of alcohol returns. I start to think about getting drunk as a solution because I'm so disturbed inside, right? I have no connection with anything. I'm just connecting with my thoughts, the story that's in my head, right? And I'm reacting all over the time. I'm not even making decisions in life. I'm being driven. And and we drink again, another threat. And with us, the drink is to die. That sounds like another threat. I'll read the next sentence. If we were to live, that's a statement. Turn that into a question. Do I want to live? Well, we had to be free of anger and the grouch and the brainstorm. And I know the brainstorm does not mean the same thing that it means today. It means, I think it means our brain's literally on fire. We're not for us. But think about that. My brain being on fire. When I am pissed off, I get dark. I don't know about you. I go real dark, really fast, and I spiral, right? And it's me just listening to a story that's in my head. And it's not, and most of it, until I write it down, is actual bullshit. I just made it up. That's the craziest thing that what I picked up when I first wrote inventory. And it says they may be the dubious luxury of normal man. Like some people can get really angry, but they won't be thinking about drink solution, drink answer, or let's go do cocaine and feel better, even though I had open heart surgery, right? But for us, for alcoholics, these things are what? Poison. What does poison do to you? It kills you. It's like messing with poisonous snakes. I don't mess with them anymore. And it took me a long time. It took me about a year and a half, like Bill says, a year and a half to really distinguish that resentment will kill me. This is what happened. Whenever I'm in resentment, I hear this page, this plastered into my consciousness. It will kill you, Terry. It is poison. You're being dominated right now. It's infinitely grave. You see, for normal people, it's not, it's okay. But for resentment, that stuff will kick our tails, guys. And it will lead us back to some type of solution. And we know a good solution called drugs and alcohol that used to work for us in the past, but our mind can't differentiate the truth from the false. We can't see the sanity in it. That's why it tells us that we are insane. We think about drinking prior to picking up, even though the consequences of the past, my mind will block that out. Back to you, Paige. Pew, pew, pew.
Pew, pew, pew. So that brings us to just one over the hour. So next week, when we kick it off, we'll be kicking it off with It Is Plain. So the two paragraphs that we wrapped up tonight, just to make everyone happy. I'm not codependent. I would never. Uh, all right. So what I'll do is I'll stop the recording and we can wrap it up with the Serenity Prayer. Thank you, guys.